and welcome to LaunchLeft 2021, an intentional space for art and activism, a podcast, a label, a launch pad for left-of-center artists. My name is Rain Phoenix, and today's very special guest is Ani Di Franco. You guys are in for an amazing conversation, so please don't forget to rate and subscribe, follow us on all socials, and if you want to watch this on video, you'll need to go to our Patreon page. Just go to Patreon and search LaunchLeft. Welcome, Ani, to the show. How's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. It's so nice to have you on the show. What are you thinking about most these days? I'm so curious.
What am I thinking about most? Getting through the day. I don't understand exactly how my job could have ended, and yet I'm busier than ever. And, like many people in this pandemic situation, I'm trying to reinvent myself and my means of livelihood, and it's exhausting. And I got a couple of kids in virtual school in my face all day. And, there's just that grappling with the daily life right now. And then, of course, there is the macro grappling that is the backdrop to it all in our society, which there is so much to say about that. But yeah, I'm just trying to get through my list of things to do on any given day.
Yeah, I know. It's a wild time to be alive. And I have to say, in regard to you, your music and your being, energy in the world, you've always been cutting edge. You've always kind of jumped ahead and done things before people even conceived of them. And I'm specifically speaking of Righteous Babe. I remember, I was a teen myself when you launched that label, you were really one of the first artist labels that existed. And I remember noting that back then, being like, whoa, what do you mean she's her own representative? It was so foreign at the time, do you know?
Yeah. By the mid-90s, we were releasing other people's records. And, it's funny, though, Rain, looking back, I just watched this, what was it? Some Netflix series or something, Hip Hop Nation or something, and it's looking back over the history of hip hop and, rap. And, you remember in the 90s when rap was hitting the radar of mainstream society, all these, was changing music. The more I learn about, the history of hip hop communities in various cities and how they evolved, the more I see, oh, wow, I wasn't alone in creating my own label, cutting out all the middlemen and thwarting a music industry that didn't know what to do with me if they tried. There was a lot of completely indie, street level hip hop labels, people just making first cassettes and then CDs, just like me, selling them in their community, to their audience that they had organically built around them, and then expanding outward from there, these like little city based and then regional based labels that were releasing completely independent music, completely below the radar of the mainstream industry. I believe now in retrospect that there are many subcultures of people doing that, and I was one, and I was lucky enough to sort of cross over, into mainstream awareness and have a lifelong career, which not all the indie upstarts of decades ago, were able to, but many were, and so I'm not, I'm not alone in it. In the folk and roots world, there's a lot of independent little labels, little promoters. So I feel like I was a part of a movement, though I do symbolize in a lot of ways that transformation.
You've traversed the globe with your music as a live, troubadour, so to speak. And I know you kind of hinted at that at the beginning of the conversation, that you're kind of trying to reimagine what what your role is as a musician in this new COVID era where there is no live performance and you have a new record. And there's fatigue these days with live streams and that whole side of things. So how do you kind of reinvent there? Did you experience a real low initially, or have you always been the kind of person who, whatever the situation, you just kind of start reinventing regardless of all the pitfalls and obstacles that might arise?
Well, I mean, I think that's what any human being has to do, right? Is adapt to the circumstances you're given. Many things are out of our control. So I'm trying to do that. You know, it's hard at not just at my age, but, you know, I'm the breadwinner of my family. You know, I have a lot of bills to pay and I got mouths to feed. And so suddenly being out of my touring job, you just have to adapt, and you have to adapt quick, and you have to make something work. So I have so many frickin' side hustles these days. I'm just like, I am trying all sorts of things. It's crazy. My life in music, my life of touring almost seems like a dream from here. You know, I feel so disconnected from all of that. It's been a year since I stood in front of an audience on a stage with my band and hit go. You know, it's just, I can barely remember, you know, so submerged as I've been, like many people in this new reality, you know, what that old reality was like. I feel like, you know, I have to do a album release show, which is going to be virtual for this new record coming out in a couple of weeks. And ugh to all of that, you know, and I almost feel like, wow, I'm going to play like one gig this year. There's going to be all kind of cameras in my face. It's going to go out there and live whatever in ones and zeros for eternity. And I don't even, how do you play guitar again? Like, I don't even remember that person. I mean, on the other side, Rain, I'll tell you, you know, I have to count my blessings. I'm a mom who, again, I travel with my work. I have to make a buck, you know, and I love my job. So I'm super lucky, but leaving my children, I mean, my oldest daughter, my daughter's 13, you know, and she did 3 years of hard time on the road with me when she was a baby. And then she entered civilian life, and I have had to leave her for weeks on end, often, her whole life. And my son is 7, and it's so hard on everybody, you know? So the fact that I have been given permission this last year to stay home with them, and not only that, but whatever the sort of the downsides, financial and otherwise, for our personal sphere, my family, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. I have been given permission to stay with my children every day for a year, and the fallout is not exactly my fault. So it's an incredible blessing for me in many ways too.
Yeah, I find that's, you know, pretty common throughout, like no matter, and that goes back to what you were saying before about, you know, like everyone, you're adapting. Like we are highly adaptable beings. And our best qualities aren't always forward facing until there's a crisis, right? And that's when like our resilience and our love and our ability to adapt and understand others tends to come out. I don't know. I guess I want to talk a little bit about, you know, why you wrote the song Revolutionary Love about that book by Valerie Carr, See No Stranger. What was the impetus for actually penning a 7-minute song to really share your understanding of what it was she was translating?
She was my impetus. She asked me to. She
wow.
said, Ani, I need some songs. Will you write me some songs? This was actually before her book came out. I sort of distilled it when we were telling the story of the record to, because I would want so much to point a finger at her book and say, look, everybody, check this out, read it. It's really valuable, useful, awesome stuff in this book. But my relationship with Valerie preceded that book. And in fact, I was one of her early readers and helped give her some feedback on her book. And she did the same for mine. I wrote a book a couple years ago now. It came out. And so we had already been friends. And she said, can you write me some songs to help my words and my wisdoms connect with people? So I wrote her 3 songs, and Revolutionary Love was one of them. And that one just sort of became my anthem. It became my mantra. So I was like, Valerie, can I put this on my record? And because I can't just leave this song on your doorstep in a basket. I need to keep playing it myself. And, it's just another point of connection between us, and a way for us to have our work resonate in the world, and try to support each other. I think that the things that I express in that song, Valerie's words that I put into song, so much address how do we get out of this space of us and them, and incredible polarization and people just locking down into their corners and fighting to the death, maybe not even remembering why. Why is it that you are my enemy, oh countrymen, fellow citizen? Like, what? How did we get here? How do we get out of here? And that's where I find Valerie's recent work and her book, See No Stranger, not just inspiring, but really freaking useful, because she talks about it. She breaks it down step by step. How do you employ the ideal of revolutionary love from moment to moment? And she talks about, the 3 tenets of revolutionary love, what it really takes to make love your guiding force. You have to have love for the other. Of course, we've long had this in our social movements. You have to have love for yourself, which has been left out of a lot of our social movements. This awareness that until you really learn to love yourself, you cannot do that for other people. It's really coming to terms with yourself, because of course the things we hate in others are the things we're suppressing, so that is a sort of a feminist intervention, as Valerie would call it, in this sort of new way of framing this work. And the third thing is love for your opponent, to specify there are some people, some others who may be actively hurting us, and how do we achieve revolutionary love with these people? People who maybe are trying to dismantle our democracy and oppress dark-skinned people who don't see women as fully human and equal. And how do you achieve revolutionary love in spaces with your opponents? This, I think, is also critical. And Valerie would say, drawing from the many traditions that she has, learned and studied and been involved with, step 1 is to stay curious. Stay curious about your opponent. And I find that very powerful, because if you keep wondering about them, you have kept yourself open. You have not locked yourself down. So you have personally allowed the space for the connection to begin, for the transformation to begin. So, though you may not be able to say, oh, I love and forgive or understand you,
right,
my opponent, in every moment, you can say, I want to understand you. I'm going to continue to ask you questions and to sincerely listen, because in that process, there will be some human connection we can find. And on that, we can build.
I agree. Just the space to wonder in itself is, kind of the beginning of awareness of how we share humanity together, regardless of our differences. Is there any advice that you would have for young artists right now? I know we're all kind of refinding what it means to be an artist and a musician, specifically in this post-pandemic or active pandemic world.
My usual advice is get the hell out there. Go out there and play a show for anyone who will listen. For no one, if no one will listen. A cat, and keep doing that and keep doing that and hone your craft and build your relationship through music, not just with your audience, but with yourself. It's an incredible journey of self-discovery, and it's also known as paying your dues. You can't. I think it's unwise to even want to be the overnight sensation, to go from your bedroom to the world necessarily, because it takes a lot of preparation to be prepared to be in front of the world. So I suggest, the way that it worked for me was just decades of performing, traveling, whether it was to 5 people or 5,000 or whatever, the job was the same. And that was to become completely naked and take risks and search for connections with people and make mistakes. So not only does that advice not apply during a pandemic, the other thing that makes my advice or my perspective not apply or seem a little antiquated right now is that I was given the opportunity to do that, to grow, and painfully and awkwardly and, not linearly, before social media.
Yeah.
I look around myself now at young people. I imagine myself being 20 again in 2021 and thinking, wow, man, how do you take the risks that I took and took again and again and again, and made so many mistakes and failed and didn't say it right and didn't play it right, the song or the moment, but I learned a lot, and I stayed up all night for 2 months thinking about it afterwards. And it became, it's all a part of my process. And I did that in public to a large degree, but not in the public of today, where every moment, your successes and your failures live forever. Everything that you ever said or wore or stood next to is, you will be accountable forever. If you make a single mistake, you're the devil incarnate and must be kicked off the planet. That's the atmosphere and the landscape now. So I think I'm so grateful that I got to have a grace period of moving through the real world and making my mistakes in time and place with other real people and achieving and learning from them, without, not that I haven't been canceled myself, I have in more recent years. And it's, anyway, I'm trying to recognize that the stakes seem so very high for risk takers these days. And my heart goes out to young people who want to push the envelope, who want to take risks, because it involves mistakes. That's how it's done.
Thank you for saying that, because I didn't even think, I mean, I have thought of that before because I was also a musician through the 90s, late 80s into 90s as a teenager. And oh my gosh, if that had been all over social media, I would have been so embarrassed, just learning like the ropes, figuring out how you are on stage and all those things that we take for granted when you came from that era, that you got to do that. Like, unless someone had an antiquated VHS camera, that was not captured. Or a film camera. There were no iPhones. It was like a completely different time. And so that's really something that I don't think about all the time in terms of, becoming a risk taker in this particular climate, how much more is on the line.
Even something as innocuous as taking my shirt off in a hot, like I'm playing back in the day in a hot, sweaty club. It's so freaking hot. We're all sweating. We're all like, and it's just like, fuck it. Fuck the patriarchy. I don't care. That's a different thing now, right? Yeah. You could create your own space and your own world and your own rules and live by them. But then if it's a much different choice to agree, as everybody tacitly must agree now, that moment can be available to everyone and scrutinized and judged by people very far outside of that moment. And that, so I would not make the same choices, if I, so yeah. I really, again, feel for those people who must live exponentially in under the judgment and the sort of fierce judgment of today's, digital world.
Okay, and now for something a little lighter. My one of my two questions: how did music find you?
I got a guitar when I was 9. I asked my parents for a guitar. I don't remember why. I don't remember where the idea came from specifically. But that guitar became my best friend. I had things I had to work out already, when I was 9, and my guitar helped me do it. And it's been that way ever since. And then along with that guitar came a dude named Michael Meldrum, who taught guitar lessons at the shop where that my first guitar came from. And I didn't take lessons from him exactly, but we met and I became his protege. He was for sure a mentor in that he was a songwriter, a troubadour, playing around town bars, coffee houses, college union rooms, and he just started taking me around with him. And my family was not very much of a family. And so I was sort of on my own. And so I was just free to be with Michael and be his shadow, from age 9 to, maybe 15 or so. And so music through, under the wing of Michael took over my whole life instantly, and it became my mission right along with him, to go and like just show up in all these different kind of situations out there in the real world, on the street, even busking. We did a lot of busking, and try to connect with people through song.
And I know we've been talking a lot in a way about activism or what you believe in, but that's my other question. What's your form of activism? You have many, so.
I guess I don't see things in terms of issues like personally. I see it as all one issue. It's about really achieving justice and equality and emancipation for all people. So it comes through. It comes through in, I hope, just sort of everything that I do, the choices that I make, the things that I put my time and energy into. I'll see you at the People's Inauguration. Valerie invited me to be a part of it. And, it's just a matter of daily showing up for the people doing the good work, such as Valerie. There are so many. I mean, last night I was up late writing a letter to the governor of California asking for for him to commute the sentence of a person who's in prison for life, who I think is a absolutely rehabilitated, transformed soul from the person who committed murder 40 years ago. It's a matter of showing up for the right thing, whether it's joining, the protests for racial justice, that were happening every day, all summer, going out there. It's a matter of, might be sending some money to groups and organizations that are doing the good work. It might be writing a letter. It might be, it might be cooking food and giving it to somebody who needs it in this moment, whatever it is. They're just, it's all one thing to me, and it's about trying to be present when you see unfairness, when you see hurt and pain. It's about trying to be accountable, so it happens in every single way there is, really.
So your record is coming out January 29th, and I know you said you'll be playing the record live, doing kind of a showcase live stream. We're both excited to be a part of the People's Inauguration, which just launched. And will you be performing at all as part of that?
Yeah, I'm going to play that song, Revolutionary Love.
Thank you for being a part of LaunchLeft and sharing with our community.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
For you watchers and listeners out there, please enjoy Ani Di Franco's song simultaneously off her new record, Revolutionary Love.
I live in two different worlds simultaneously. The one I seem to live in, and the one that lives in me. And one is full of violence, oppression and disrespect. And one is full of longing to breathe and to connect. Yeah, my inner world is fragile, and the outer world is done. And this whole thing is such a hassle. Won't you wake me when it's done? I live in two different worlds simultaneously. The one where we are fractured, and the one where we are free. If freedom requires safety, yeah, freedom requires trust. Yeah, freedom requires balance in the equation of us. Yeah, my inner world is fragile, and the outer world is done. And this whole thing is such a hassle. Won't you wake me when it's done? When it's done. When it's done. simultaneously, and between them is a chasm unfolding unfathomably, and in that chasm shadow, and in that shadow I stare, facing towards the light, nothing in my hands. Yeah, my inner world is fragile, and the outer world is done, and this whole thing is such a hassle. Won't you wake me when it's done? When it's done, 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 when it's done.
LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.